We are continuing to read in the book Called to Serve, Autobiographies of Don and Doris Ann Roth. In Dad's section, which is the first half of the book, Chapter 4, My Elementary and Secondary Education. My years of education are divided into the usual categories: elementary, secondary, and higher education, or college. My elementary years of grades 1 to 8 were in 3 different schools. I entered first grade at the Walnut Hills English Seventh-day Adventist Church on Taft Road in Cincinnati, Ohio. I traveled to school every morning in my dad's Model T Ford with Lillian, Harold, and Margaret. Unfortunately, those years, 1933 to 35, were Depression years for America, and Dad and Mom had a hard time keeping 4 children in a private school with transportation, tuition, books, clothing, and other expenses on a monthly basis. I have a very dim memory of those first 2 years of school. I do remember coming home from school one day and Dad, with a long face, announced to the family that the conference notified him and other Ohio pastors that they would get a decrease in salary the following month. I recall my father saying that they had at least 2 or 3 salary cuts during those dark Depression years. Years in Cleveland area. In 1935, we moved to northern Ohio, where my father became pastor of the Cleveland German Church when Elder Weber retired. We lived first in Lakewood so that we would be within walking distance of the elementary school sponsored by the English Church of Cleveland. There was a railroad track between where we lived in Lakewood and our school. I recall that every day my mother gave us the same admonition: be careful of any trains that come. Make sure that you are well off the tracks as the cars go by. One very cold wintry day, as we walked the tracks en route to school, we saw a body beside the tracks. It alarmed us, and we ran the rest of the way to school to tell the teacher. She called the police and found that the railroad tramp obviously had too much alcohol in his system and just froze to death as he lay down beside the tracks waiting for a freight train to come by. After a couple of years in Lakewood, we moved to Valley Road in Cleveland so Dad could be closer to his work at the church. We made good connections by streetcar from our home in Lakewood. I spent 4 years of my elementary grades in the Lakewood school before Dad announced one day that he had accepted a call to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and that we would move once again. There's a photo here titled Elementary School in Lakewood, Ohio, about 1937. Don is seen in the second row, third from right. Esther, Lillian, and Harold are also in the photo. Second row,
Don,
third from right. Oh, I see him. Okay. So there is the photo. I know that you're not able to see that. A move to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Pittsburgh Junior Academy became the next school we attended. We lived in South Pittsburgh, so it was necessary for us to continue the practice of going to school by streetcar. We changed cars in downtown Pittsburgh and headed west to the Shady Avenue location of our school in the suburban area of West Liberty. I recall with clarity the teacher we had in Pittsburgh, Mrs. Martha Bartlett. Her husband farmed near Bartlett. Her husband farmed near Export, a small town east of Pittsburgh. The Bartletts had 3 children in school: Sally, Roscoe, and John. Roscoe sat a couple of rows behind me. I do recall that he was a very studious and intelligent fellow. I mention Roscoe specifically because today, 2007, Roscoe is an elected representative serving in the United States Congress. In his 7th term as congressman from a district in western Maryland, Mrs. Bartlett died while living with Roscoe and family at their home near Frederick, Maryland. A no-nonsense teacher/principal, Mrs. Bartlett exemplified a model Christian educator. I learned a great deal from her. She maintained good discipline, yet it was evident that she loved all of us as students. One summer, the Bartletts asked me to spend some of my summer vacation at their farm. Mr. Bartlett worked hard to put in his crops and then harvest them in late summer and early fall. These weeks, probably 4 or 5 according to my best memory, provided the only time in my life that I had experience as a farmer. I do recall that we worked hard and had terrific meals. Mrs. Bartlett was a great cook, and we had plenty of time in the evenings when we did not have to pitch hay or pull weeds. I developed a serious appreciation for the life of an American farmer. Sally Bartlett finished school, married, and then lived in the Pittsburgh area most of her life. John, their youngest son, did not finish college, but went into a major business in Florida, where he still lives today. So here's a photo that's captioned, Don went to school in Pittsburgh with Roscoe Bartlett, now a United States congressman.
I remember Roscoe Bartlett.
His mother was their teacher. Okay, so here is Roscoe Bartlett, congressman. Teacher.
And he was born.
I don't know where he was born or when. Teacher appreciation and a move to New York City. There are two teachers that I remember with a great deal of admiration and fondness, Mrs. Martha Bartlett and Dr. Lawrence Smart. I first met Professor Smart when we moved to New York City early in 1942, in the middle of my sophomore year of secondary school, just weeks after Pearl Harbor and the entrance of the United States into World War II. We resided in a suburb called Woodhaven. We commuted to Brooklyn every day by subway to attend school at the Washington Avenue Church, pastored by Elder William A. Fagel. The principal then was H.J. Alcock, his last year of teaching before retirement. The facility
This is very historical.
Yes. The facilities were very unsuitable for both an elementary school and a four-year academy, so the conference diligently searched for a new facility. They called Professor Smart for a principal's post in New Bedford, Massachusetts. He spent full time looking for a new location and found it in Woodside at a former labor union building. Greater New York Academy began the 1943 school year in the new facility, just a half block from the New York City subway system. We traveled from Woodhaven to Woodside every day by the mass transit of the nation's largest city. There were less than 100 students in the high school and elementary sections. It took a while for me to get acquainted with Principal Smart because he was a New Englander from the state of Maine, and most people from that part of the nation were supposed to be rather conservative and not too easy to get to know. But I found him to be fair, efficient, and understanding of the needs of students. We became good friends and remained so until he died in 2001 at his retirement home in South Lancaster, Massachusetts. After his service at Greater New York Academy, he became the educational secretary of the Greater New York Conference and then held the same post for the Northern New England Conference. Later, he served in the same capacity for the Canadian Union Conference. From there, he and his family shipped out to the Far Eastern Division in Singapore, where he served as a division departmental director for 6 years, 1954 to 1960. When he returned to the United States, he first went to Iowa and then ended his career as director of education for the Atlantic Union Conference. After retirement, he spent full-time teaching classes at Atlantic Union College and directing the school's development and fundraising programs. At this point, I want to express my appreciation for all teachers in the educational system of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, but I single out Professor Smart because of the profound influence that he had in my own life. He took me under his wing during a transition time of my life. I salute the memory of this jewel in God's educational kingdom. There's a photo on this page captioned, "This is Greater New York Academy, Woodside, Long Island, New York, where Don went to secondary school from 1942 to 1945. Senior year and graduation. During my junior year at Greater New York Academy, I served as editor of a new school paper, The Skyscraper. This was the start of my love of writing and editing. My senior year proved to be a very busy one. The senior class of 1945 asked me to be their president, and this took a great deal of work and time. There were only 14 in our class, including my sister Lillian. Graduation was in mid-June of 1945. The war in Europe had ended just a few months earlier. In April, when I turned 18, I went with my father to the local draft board on Long Island to register for military service. Within 2 months of my graduation, the war ended in the Far East as President Truman decided to drop atomic bombs on 2 major Japanese cities that brought the war in the Far East to a rapid conclusion. I heard nothing from the draft board, so I never had the privilege of being a member of the armed forces of the United States. Graduation venue was at the Washington Avenue Church. Pastor Andrew Faring spoke at the consecration service on Friday night. Pastor William Fagel, senior minister of the Washington Avenue Church in Brooklyn, spoke for the Sabbath morning baccalaureate service. Commencement took place on Sunday morning, June 24. Oh, that's the anniversary of our wedding. June 24, 1984. The very next morning, Monday, my father and I climbed into our family car and traveled south to Tacoma Park, Maryland, where I matriculated at Washington Missionary College, WMC. My friend Doris had come for my graduation, so Dad invited her to ride along with us. And that's the end of chapter 4.
You hadn't read all this before?
Well, I've read it before, but this is the first time to you.